Out there are 20 million light years of space, and that's just what we know about so far. In fact, what we don't know makes all the knowledge mankind has accumulated over the centuries add up to very little. Perhaps there'll always be more mysteries than answers, but then we all love a mystery. We have two more stories for you tonight. Stories of ordinary people, but what they describe is anything but ordinary. The evidence is compelling, but is it convincing? The woman in one of our stories tried to convince a jury when she took her psychic powers to court. We'll bring you their verdict later. First, though, we've launched satellites and space stations hundreds of thousands of miles into orbit. Space probes have got more than 500 million miles away. Now, if we've got all that, some ask, what might another civilization have? Figures show that a UFO, an unidentified flying object, is spotted by someone, somewhere in this world, every 3 minutes. Certain areas report many more sightings than others. There have been concentrations of sightings from the Australian bush to the Brazilian rainforests. But in the past few years, nowhere has had more UFO reports than a certain part of Scotland. In the skies around the town of Falkirk over the last couple of years, around 800 UFOs have been sighted. It's a phenomenon which has reached such proportions that anxious locals have called a public meeting. They want to know the truth. What's behind the sudden upsurge?
There was a cloud in the sky, pretty low down, and a large revolving lights.
Tended to sort of flare up and then dull down again, as if a light was turning towards me and then turning away again.
Suddenly it started to move away, not very quickly, and then suddenly collapsed in on itself and disappeared.
The fact remains, however, that UFOs are real. Of that, there is no question. But it is what they are or represent that is the question. It would be totally foolish of mankind to sweep under the carpet all these UFO reports.
Hundreds of people have phoned me regarding strange sightings in the sky. I know these people personally. I mean, they're not going to make stories up like this. I mean, they've actually faced a lot of ridicule, and they've showed a lot of great courage coming forward and stating that they've seen something which nobody can define and nobody can give an answer for.
Most sightings have been close by Falkirk in Bonnybridge. Once occupied by Romans, later known for its iron foundries, Bonnybridge now has a bizarre new claim to fame. It's been blitzed by UFOs. Ray and Kathy Prosek were driving along the motorway nearby. As they approached a viaduct spanning the road, they say they saw an object the size of a jumbo jet hovering above it.
The back end was elliptical, and as we passed underneath it, I could see it was triangular in shape, and there was a light at each corner. We passed underneath the viaduct, and looking back there, sitting on the other side, was another craft, and it looked like a mirror image, the way they were pointing towards each other.
It didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before, so of course you automatically think, you know, UFO.
Driving home to neighbouring Larbert, Neil Malcolm says he was followed by a ball of light.
I got the fright of my life, really. I knew it wasn't anybody's headlights or anything because it lit up the full interior of the car.
He rushed in to tell the rest of the family. As they went to look, Neil's wife Lorraine grabbed her video camera.
And I zoomed in and I wasn't sure what I could see. I mean, you know what a helicopter and a plane looked like, it definitely wasn't anything like that. And I had to stop because it disappeared behind the building.
Studies of the video have been unable to explain what it shows. Even experts like Malcolm Robinson, who's analysed reports of UFOs for 25 years, are baffled by the wave of sightings.
We check with airports, we also check with the local police. And then you also check with meteorological stations to see any flights of weather balloons, etc. Some reports are misidentifications, obviously, of aircraft and the like, but this leaves us with a small residue which is highly unusual and which demand investigation.
But the most puzzling UFO case in the area must be the one which happened in these woods near Livingston. It's a case that the police came to treat officially as assault by person or persons unknown. It happened to a forestry worker, Bob Taylor, who was out on patrol checking for stray sheep in the forest. It was a routine task, one he'd done countless times over the years he'd worked there. As usual, there were no sheep, but as he rounded a corner, he discovered something else.
What the?
A huge thing with a big round dome, a very dark grey colour, and it had a big flange going all the way around. I could see arms sticking out of this flange with what I took to be blades on the top. The two balls came out, two balls, I think they'd be about 3 feet in diameter with about 6 spikes. They came right up beside me, and I remember feeling a tug at that time, and that was it.
Bob Taylor can't remember exactly what followed. The next thing he does remember is lying on the ground, dazed and bleeding. Unable to walk and in no condition to drive, he set off for help on his hands and knees. By the time he arrived home, he was in a state of near total collapse.
Bob, what happened to you?
I'm needing a drink.
I'll get you right.
He looked quite shocked, and he was drained. He was right white, and his face was dirty.
Was it the lorry? Did you have a crash?
I was attacked.
You were attacked?
Aye.
Whereabout? Oh, look at the state of your trousers, they're all torn.
And he said, I've been attacked. And I said, what with? And he said, a spaceship. And I said, oh, goodness me, there's no such a thing as a spaceship. I'm going to phone the doctor. You must have fell and hurt your head.
Bob's wife called his boss, Malcolm Drummond. He went to the forest and he found Bob's abandoned truck. And that wasn't all. In the clearing, he found impressions had been made in the ground.
There is no doubt in my mind that these marks were made by a perfectly solid, heavier-than-air object. They had been made by some machine which had come vertically downwards. I think there's no doubt about that.
The area was fenced off and police began an intensive search. They found nothing. It was one of the most puzzling cases Detective Inspector Ian Walk has ever come across.
I couldn't believe it at first. The ground was soft, and there were no signs of the tracks having come from somewhere or having went anywhere. They just seemed to have arrived.
Near the caterpillar-type tracks were holes in the ground, 3 inches deep, 40 holes in all.
At first I thought they were possibly made by equipment that would be used by the Forestry Commission, but we went to their premises later that day, examined all the vehicles, and nothing at all matched.
So what else could have caused the marks? One theory begins with the laying of water pipes in the forest and goes on to explain what Bob Taylor saw, a theory developed by science writer Stuart Campbell.
He thought he saw a spacecraft, because that was the only logical explanation to him, sitting in a clearing, but it was a magnified image, in my opinion, of a planet millions of miles away.
But what about Bob's injuries? The theory continues that the sight of the mirage triggered an epileptic fit.
It caused him to be paralyzed. He couldn't speak, and of course he was unable to walk. These are symptoms of that.
Was it in the forest?
But Bob hadn't suffered from epilepsy before, and those who know him have no reason to doubt him.
Bob Taylor was a straightforward forester who had worked here for many years. He had no illusions of any kind, and he's not the sort of chap who would have invented a story like this.
Then there were the rips in the trousers Bob Taylor was wearing. Rips, he claims, were made by probes from the UFO. The trousers were sent to the police laboratories to be put under the scrutiny of forensic expert Lester Knibb.
There was 2 sets of damage predominantly, close enough to be considered symmetrical. It's obviously been caused by a lifting action. It's not the sort of action that's caused by a fall. The tear would normally be down the trousers. Certainly the story could fit the bill, that some object or objects had moved across a clearing towards him, attempted to lift him up and carry him off.
Even to this day, we're completely baffled of, one, who assaulted Mr. Taylor, and two, what made these marks on the ground.
This is only one of the many local UFO cases which remain unsolved. Some witnesses say they're left with profound after effects, desperate to find a way of coming to terms with seeing something that defies belief. One of the most recent cases has left two local men with an obsession to find out what it was they encountered on a lonely stretch of road through the Pentland Hills.
We come back here quite often, looking about with our camera and that. I'm just interested to find out, to see if we can maybe see this again. The craft was bigger than the road. Me and Colin reckon that the craft was about 30 foot wide. We were both very frightened. It has sort of affected my life, seeing something like this. I've never seen nothing ever like it before.
Since I've suffered from bad depression, which I never used to do, it's just always on my mind. I just want to know what happened that night. I didn't really believe in it, UFOs, but this experience has sort of changed my mind.
The Scottish UFOs are affecting local people in another way. They're becoming a tourist attraction. A plaque has been put up where Bob Taylor claimed his close encounter in the forest, bringing visitors from near and possibly very far. After the break, the woman who went through 7 operations with nothing but her own powers to block the pain.